So hi, welcome to the webinar Representation Matters. My name is Winnifred Jong and I'm the creator and director of the CSA award-winning web series Tokens, and I'm thrilled to moderate this panel, Representation Matters. I'm currently in Calgary, Alberta, and in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play in the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nations, Region 3, and all the people who make up their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. I want to welcome our esteemed, kick-ass panelists. Look at them all, and ask them to introduce themselves. So I'm going to say their names one at a time because there's no way to do this, but I'd like Deanna Cadette from WarnerMedia.
Hi, thank you so much, Winnifred. I am excited to be on this panel. So many wonderful, amazing, talented women who've been in this industry. So my name is Deanna Cadette. I'm the executive director of the brand new WarnerMedia Global Access Programs, and I'm excited to be here to connect WarnerMedia with the amazing talent we have above and below the line, emerging and experienced. So that's it for me. I'm gonna say thank you and pass it on to the next person.
Okay, then we have Joan Jenkinson from the Black Screen Office.
Hi, I'm really thrilled to be here. You guys are rock stars and it's great to be among this group. I'm part of one of the founders of the newly formed Black Screen Office. So two newly formed things to start out with. The Black Screen Office came about to ensure that Black Canadian content is developed, produced, marketed, and distributed internationally, and to ensure that we're represented throughout the industry at all levels. So before jumping on board with the Black Screen Office, I still am a producer with Artemis Pictures. We develop TV drama series. Before that, I was a broadcast executive for many years and commissioned hundreds of hours of programming in all different genres. And prior to that, I was the executive director of Women in Film and Television for 5 years. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great, thank you so much, Joan. And next up is Kelly Liu from the Real Asian Film Festival.
I'm actually kind of still a little starstruck that I'm on this panel with everyone here. So sorry, I might be freaking out inside, but I'm really happy to be here, and I'm here on behalf of Real Asian as the shorts programmer there, and we are Canada's largest pan-Asian film festival with our 24th edition happening digitally in November. And we're just a festival really dedicated to supporting community and really thinking about the ways that we can contextualize and frame stories and like really engage conversations. So really happy to be here.
Thank you. And we have Meg McKay from the Indigenous Screen Office.
Hi, my name's Meg McKay. I'm with the Indigenous Screen Office. We're in our second year promoting Indigenous narrative sovereignty on screen through advocacy and through funding programs. And I'm the program coordinator there. And I'm so excited to be here and very intimidated, but it's gonna be fine. And everyone's wonderful and everything's great. And yeah, I'm a program coordinator, arts administrator, and sometimes TV writer. Yeah. Fun.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we have Nathalie Younglai from BIPOC TV and Film.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I am a writer, co-producer on CBC's Corner, and I started BIPOC TV and Film back in 2012. It was originally called Creators of Color, then it was called Indigenous and Creators of Color, and then a new name change to BIPOC TV and Film. But in essence, it's been the same organization all the way through, really dedicated to increasing representation both in front and behind the camera, in particular with Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Great, thank you so much. And Tara Taylor, not the least, last but not least,
least.
yes, Tara Taylor from the Emerging Lens Film Festival.
Hi, everybody. As well, I am very, very honored to be on this panel amongst this bunch. I'll be contacting some of you in future to have some collab conversations. So our film festival's 10 years. We're celebrating our 10th year this year. And I believe in the East Coast, we were among one of the first festivals to go online after the beautiful, lovely, unlovely COVID happened. So we were like left with, oh my goodness, what happens? Because we actually screen in April every year. So we did an online in June, and it was a full 5-day. And so actually next week, we're going to just be doing it in person, just so we can still say we celebrated in 2020. But what we do is we provide a platform for BIPOC featured voices. So we actually take everybody, but we always like to say that we're BIPOC featured completely. So your films are accepted as long as you have, you know, predominantly BIPOC cast. In front is behind the screen. As well, I'm a professional playwright, and that's how I first came into the film industry, filmmaker for about 20 years, and a new broadcaster, Ace Television. So yeah, just interested, and it's at my heart to give, you know, our stories and our voices, to give us a platform.
Welcome. Thank you. Oh my God, this conversation is going to be amazing. So next we're going to start with just starting with the idea of representation matters. I use that in the hashtag of my social media. And so it's a catchphrase, it's a rally cry, and I plant my flag whenever I post about something. And I just wanted to know what that means to you personally and what it means to your organization. So you can raise your hands and ask questions, answer your question. Thank you. Joan?
For me personally, and for I think the Black Screen Office, is it just really came to life for me, not only through the Black Lives Matter movement and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. It again hit home to me in a real way when I recently saw a statistic that said Black people are 20 times more likely to be shot dead by a police officer than white people. And I don't know, like, I'm staggered by that. It's not like I didn't know it, but just hearing it so officially stated, it was, you know, in our largest city in Canada, we're saying that Black lives don't matter, and it's happening here. And I feel like in film and television that we're experiencing a sort of symbolic annihilation of Black people because we are not on that screen. We don't see ourselves. In the history of Canadian television, there have been 5 series that have been produced by Black people in the entire history of Canadian television. And it says to me, because we're not seeing ourselves, we're not represented, that we don't matter. And what the Black Screen Office is here to say is that we do matter, and we're going to make sure that we claim space in Canadian screen-based industries, and we're going to advocate for it on an ongoing basis, because nobody is going to keep that voice going if we don't keep it going for ourselves.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Tara?
And yes, Joan, that's an extremely excellent point, because oh gosh, a couple of years ago, I was on a Halifax Black Film Festival panel, and the question was, how do we get more diversity on screen? And you know, I was the moderator, so of course I let all the panelists, you know, speak. And then at the end, you know, I was hoping that someone would touch upon it, but I wondered and asked, you know, how can we get our folks on screen if they're not behind screen as well? So this is, I guess, when I was realizing that was kind of my drive. I mean, I've been in this industry for so long, but just realizing that drive, you know, we have to start doing. I mean, it's really about a week, 1 minute, some other little small short films that can get our folks in crew positions and that kind of thing. Then they start to see themselves behind and on screen. So if you have a casting director who has, you know, a breakdown for a doctor, and that's it, it does not have to always look the same. You know, you can put any kind of doctor in there, you know, and I think that's where my passion lies.
Thank you.
I think just jumping off of that, you know, what Taylor said, it's so important that we are in all positions, like casting directors, execs, keys on crew. Those are all those little decisions all accumulate and make a difference. And if we're not in those key positions, it's a fight to make it happen. And for me, like when that hashtag first came up, and I don't even know who started it, but I'm so grateful to them. But it was like such a kind of, was I guess a rallying cry, but also an affirmation, because it's so dehumanizing to walk onto a set and you were the only person of color there. And you don't have, like, there's so much power that's taken away and there's so much voice that's taken away. And in order to kind of even just exist in that space, it takes up so much energy. And that's why, for me, representation matters.
Thank you. Kelly?
I think just to also jump on that, it's been a really interesting moment for Real Asian to kind of look internally as well. I think as a festival that was founded on ensuring that Asian representation was being available in a festival space, I think we've like definitely realized that there's still so much work to be done, and it's not just about using our platform to support Asian filmmakers, but to understand what are the ways that Asian communities, what are our relationship to thinking about our relationships to Indigenous and Black communities, and how can we actually use our platform to generate these conversations, to build stronger relationships, and to see the ways that we might be complicit or the ways that we actually need to work harder and really, you know, start kind of producing our own resources instead of always relying on the knowledge and the lived experience and the brilliance of, again, Indigenous and Black like activists and scholars and whatnot. So I think it's been also an interesting time in terms of, for us to really, really think hard about what is representation and why does that matter, and like kind of like why do we do this work? So yeah.
Thank you.
I think if I could go as
Yeah,
well, to kind of piggyback on what everyone is saying already. At the Indigenous Screen Office, we were born of the idea that a lack of Indigenous representation was not only harmful to our communities in many ways, and I feel like the intersectionality that we're experiencing now, and the fact we can have these solidarity in these conversations now with other communities is so important, largely because there's this kind of base assumption that I don't know that all folks realize that they have in this industry as well, that like white, straight, cisgender narratives are seen as base normal, and everything on top of that is a flavor. And that's why I feel like people from our communities don't necessarily get cast in certain roles, as you were saying, Tara, about when you think doctor, it can be a doctor who looks like anyone, you know? And with representation over time, that narrative can shift. And I think we'd like for things were more peaceful with everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, on a personal point, my mom says being a boss matters, right?
Yeah.
Being the boss really does matter. And I think that from a professional point of view, you know, my background's in so many different areas, and I love reading reports. I'm have a policy background. And one of the reports that really struck me was a Women in View report from last year that looked at women representation when a man is in when men are in the key roles, there's less representation, and the representation grows as the decision makers look more and more like, you know, women of color, Indigenous women. The data is there, the percentages are there are women of color in key roles goes up, or women from Indigenous groups go up when there are women who are from those groups leading in key positions. So, you know, we have our own experiences from what our parents tell us, what our moms tell us. We have the data, we have the experience from other creators. We know that decision-making and leadership matters. It matters. And so for me, and I'm echoing what everybody else says, you know, you need more. And when you look at the pyramids of any organization, when you look at the top leadership, the boards, you know, it's not representative. It's very homogenous, and that's where the decision making is happening, and that's why we're in this situation. So, echoing what everybody else says, representation and decision making levels, leadership really matters.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Joan.
Just one more small. This is just very anecdotal, but I have this experience when I'm working with white writers who, when there's a Black character, they say say this is a Black character who's 23 years old or whatever. And I'm saying, well, what about the other characters? Why don't you say what they are? And she says, well, I just want to do colorblind casting. And I'm like, what casting director is colorblind? I don't know of any, because if you don't say what color that person is, it's going to be a white person. And it's like in the small things too, that representation is so critical. We have to be vigilant about everything all the time.
Yes. I think that's so true. And that really, like the fact that the default, not mentioning it, is white is a problem.
Yeah.
And even like, as you're saying, like those little small things are things that we can do. Like now in my scripts, I'll write down if the person's white. And I'm sorry if that offends white people, but you know, we have to say it when, you know, the person's Asian, the person's Black. So let's do it across the board so that the default is not white.
Yeah.
Thank goodness the term is representation matters. Like I have such a problem with the word diversity. It's basically a box checker for you know, the folks that don't look like us.
Yeah. And so a lot of you, I've met you through being on the same circuit and circles. I think we're at a watershed moment, and you know, the reason why we're having this panel is because of this watershed moment. What's the goal now? You know, this is the first time we've all been brought together for a long time, and we want to be active. Like, this is not just a panel to inform. This is an action call. So what do you think is the goal, and how do we keep this message on top when all of a sudden, you know, the news cycle goes on to something else? How do we keep this message strong?
I can go. At the Black Screen Office, we have some really tangible goals, and because we're new, they're very top of mind, very fresh, and they formed out of the situation that we're in now, where there's a lot of noise. There are a lot of people who feel empowered by what's going on. We're getting a lot of attention, but I've been in this business long enough to see this kind of attention come and go. I think it's as loud as it's ever been, but the fact is that there have been like very strong urgings, like from agencies like the CRTC that says you need to have a cultural diversity plan, and people put them together, and then they do a couple of things, and then they go on shelves, and then we don't hear about it again until somebody else makes some noise. So I think this is the biggest noise we've heard, and hopefully it will last for a long time, but I'm not that optimistic. So we've formed as an organization because we want this conversation to stay top of mind. We know in order to do that, we have to start with statistics. There are no statistics. Like, how is that possible that we don't know, you know, who's doing what? And all we have is anecdotal stuff. I have to go to the websites of the major funders and the major institutions to look at who works there, who are the people in the leadership roles. And none of them look like me. It's like so completely white, it's embarrassing. some, some of these organizations are making quick changes because it is so embarrassing. But we want to make sure that advocacy work continues, that we realize that removing systemic barriers is a long-term commitment, and there are a lot of actions that have to be taken along the way to ensure that happens. And as Deanna says, who the decision makers are is really important. So we have to keep fighting to make sure that we are those gatekeepers. We also have to fight for money. We need money talks. And we're patting ourselves a lot after the ISO, who have been fighting for envelopes of money that are distinct from the mainstream sources of funding, because we need to determine how we spend our money. And the money that we get is different from the money that other people get. And sometimes we need our own funds so that we can top up our development and our production, so that we can level the playing field, and so that we can perform internationally. And I think as a group, it's so great to see all of us women together, because we all have organizations that have similar objectives. And I think when we come together to work on, collecting data on viewership and demographics and trends, that together we're stronger. Together there is that intersectionality that can benefit all of us. And at the end of the day, we also want to be able to celebrate together. We want to know that we've put out this energy, we've worked with the mainstream community, we've worked among ourselves, and that we can celebrate because we've been successful.
Yes, yes, yes. Wow, yes, I keep shaking my head. Yes, yes, amen. So along those lines, I'm also on the board of Screen Nova Scotia here in Nova Scotia, and we're doing an on the diversity representation panel, I'll call it. And so what we're doing is raising funding to go to MDR and do this, just to get them to, it's a data collection organization, and to get the numbers, because your call to action and powers that be your call to action when the numbers are there, right? And the data is there, so that we can know. So maybe we should just kind of share knowledge and ask MDR to do this in all of our organizations, collect the real data, so we can say, here, look, we're not just talking out of our behinds, right? This really exists or doesn't exist.
Yeah, I love that point about Joan. Wonderful. I love the way you expressed everything, because now I feel like I have nothing to say because you expressed it all. But I want to get my comment. And Tara, to talk about that data, I know I'm a little bit of a data nerd. Okay, I'm a policy person, and I love the numbers. And you're absolutely right. And I think, I think it's what is different is that it does feel different. And I agree with you, Joan. We've seen this before. It's 20, 30, 40 years of it's up and down. But I feel like we're having different types of conversations. I think we are going deeper with people who are, everybody's at a different point in their journey. And I think one of the things that for us here at Warner, that which is brand new for me, everybody has a role to play, right? Everyone has a role to play. It's not just us. It's people from, I guess we'll call it mainstream, white people who are able-bodied. All of us have a role to play. And I think people are recognizing that more. We're not saying that this is your work or go and do a diversity work. There are people who are white, who are able-bodied, who are not from LGBTQ communities, are saying, what can I do? How do I get involved? And are feeling more comfortable being able to stand up and say, I want to do something. Now, how do I do that? That's a whole other thing. But I do feel encouragement from that. Natalie, when I saw you with Randy, with Randy from Bell, okay, well, that's Look at Natalie. Look at her go. So anyway, I'm just saying that I think that people recognize that they have a role to play too, that they have to do the homework as well. And I think that's going to go sink this message a little bit deeper so we can move a little bit further.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think there are a lot more allies now than before. And with social media, there's a lot more pressure. There's a lot more public pressure, which is kind of scary, but also exciting. And I think that it's really interesting to me that right now we're finally having conversations where people are acknowledging that systemic racism is real and is actually in the industry. Like, we've moved beyond, you know, even 10 years ago, the conversation was like, oh, is there really racism? It's just like, it's, you know, whoever's the best wins kind of a thing. And now people are finally acknowledging, and there's kind of a collective agreement that that is actually not how our industry works and has worked, and that isn't how people have gotten ahead. So I guess that part of it makes me hopeful. But I think also, like, the work needs to happen like in public, but also like a lot of the work needs to happen behind closed doors, where like you're having those difficult conversations and you're like trying to push things forward little by little. And sometimes I feel like sometimes it'll look like from the outside that things aren't happening, and then suddenly something will change. And yeah. Sorry, I don't have a good end to that sentence. I just kind of trailed off.
Thanks, Meg.
Okay, I can jump in. Natalie, I would like to say that I am the queen of the trail off thought. So I'm about to do this. I think I'd like to say this on behalf of myself, not necessarily on behalf of my organization, because I feel our organization is a collective and constantly evolving, and I don't ever want to speak as one voice on behalf of something so large. But I think the way that I think about it when it comes to change is like one drop of water can hit a rock and it just makes it wet, whereas many drops of water over time can split that rock in half. And I think it's important that we continue to work together, and sometimes change is incremental and sometimes it comes all at once. But I will say this too, and I don't know if this is like a metaphor for what's happening right now, and I'm really hoping that it isn't, but I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and there were a beautiful thing that was happening through the Black Lives Matter movement, where there were so many Black Lives Matter flags out on folks' porches, like so many folks in solidarity. But now as I walk through the city, seeing that they're being replaced with like Halloween decorations. And I'm like, I really hope that
there you go.
I hope that this movement stays in hearts and not necessarily in decoration.
Yeah. We're not a season.
Exactly. It wasn't solidarity season. This has to happen all of the time.
I mean, now it's a good time to like check in with all the people who posted their Black squares, right? Like, what have you been doing since then?
Yeah.
And what are your next steps?
Yeah, I think just like on that too, right? Something that even for us at Real Asian, like just there's this idea of just being fearful that we might be saying the wrong thing or not doing the right thing. But I think that's where it actually like that the work needs to be done there. It just shows like the gaps. I think on our end, that's when like risk, this idea of like risk is like, no, this is actually where we need to push harder and like really work through it. And these conversations matter, and we can't just because we're scared to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing that we go with a safer option of not even having these conversations. And so I think hopefully, I know like on our end, like we've been hoping to really kind of put ourselves in this position where really pushing ourselves to think again further to like our work and what we value. And I think just like what everyone was saying is like so brilliant. I can't really add more, but what Joan was mentioning, it is like a long-term game. It's not, I mean, a long-term process. It's not like we're not looking for a shortcut or anything. It's definitely something we have to commit like long term. So yeah.
And I think what's about that point about change, you know, people bring up this point like, oh, change, you know, it takes a long time. Not everything takes a long time. Some things do. Some processes, yes, they are these deeply entrenched processes and they're complicated. But there's a lot of things that can happen soon, and we got to celebrate those things as much as possible. And I think that helps keeps the optimism in the air when we think like, oh man, how are we going to actually have, I won't even say it because I might make a mistake and totally embarrass myself. But anyways, but just to say that, you know, to keep that perspective that yes, it's a long road and it's a difficult road, but we could have some things can change tomorrow. And I think that's the beauty of looking around ourselves. What can we do in our own lives? What can we do in our organization? What are the quick wins that we can keep in the air and celebrate and keep people's, you know, the optimism going. So yeah, sorry, Kelly, I just wanted to jump on that point about that time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a long journey, but we can have victories all along the way, and we keep celebrating those things that keep people's optimism up, especially our young people, actually, and older people too. We need our optimism.
Yeah, this leads a lot into my next question, and it's like, now we're encouraging a lot of storytellers. We know about character building through identity. So authentic representation, people who author their own stories. So now how do we encourage these emerging people who haven't had the track record or haven't had this sort of fight that we've been fighting? How do we encourage emerging Indigenous, Black, and POC filmmakers to tell their stories?
Well, I have to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just want to say first that, of course, it's important. I mean, our slogan is our stories and our voices, and it's extremely important for us to be telling our stories. But at the same time, I don't like the pressure that just because I'm Black, I have to tell a Black story. Like, you know, I'm a horror fan, I'm a science fan, I love classical music, I love all kind of stuff. And, you know, I dress the way I dress, I walk the way I walk, and carry myself the way I carry myself because it's who I'm made up of. So there's that whole little, you know, thing on the fence of like, don't box me in just because I look like what I look like, you know? So I just want to put that out there too.
No, for sure, for sure. And the thing is, you know, we're all so different, and that's why you can have different stories, and you can have, but I feel like sometimes there's either funders look for a lot of, they kind of look for stories that, you know, television, they look for the same sort of story. I don't know how many the same environments there are, you know, I can count probably how many medical shows or police shows. So how do we become original? Like where do we fit there? How do we encourage people to do that? Thanks, Meg.
I think that not necessarily to counter that, but I think that like we kind of already are telling our stories, and the youth already are too. And a beautiful thing that happens with like social media platforms, I'm thinking specifically TikTok, is you can watch so many youth who are using this platform to tell their stories, even if in a brief moment, and they can be funny and they can be scary, or they can be a sketch or what have you. I think that, sorry, that just sometimes when I say things, Siri pops up in my thing, and I was on a roll. I think, yeah, we already are telling our stories. And I think that any story that I'm going to tell, specifically like as a comedian or a comedy writer in my art life, is going to inherently have the infusion of my Mi'kmaq and Scottish heritage in it. Like it's going to, because it's coming through my lens. It's my story that way, regardless of what it's about. I think what we should be doing, and I think like the role of the ISO and the Black Screen Office and everyone on this panel, our role is to support those stories that are already happening and nurture them, advocate for them, and finance them. Because as Joan said, money talks.
Yes, Joan.
I've been speaking to some French Canadian, Black French Canadian producers, filmmakers, and I'm afraid for them because they're 15 years behind where we are now. It's really, really shocking and disheartening to see. I don't want to be disheartened, I want to be positive. But what I hope for them is that they'll be able to leapfrog over the things that we've had to do to get to where we are now. Because I think in this next little while, money's going to be thrown at them. And so many of them have been relegated to the emerging status for such a long time. They've had no opportunity to advance their skills because they're told you don't have enough experience. Well, I can't get experience because that white producer is not hiring me. And so my hope is that we'll be able to find a way of mentoring and providing internships for these creators so that they can be set up for success and so that their stories can be told. And my real hope is that they will be able to, as Meg says, use things like TikTok and leapfrog over all the crazy linear things that we've been doing and get their stories told.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, I think just on that too, I think for us, like this idea of also like nurturing stories on a festival platform, it's not like screening the film is actually just this, not even everything, it's just like the start of something. And so actually my colleague, Jasmine, she started the Youth Critics Initiative, and it's a cohort to nurture and support emerging Asian Canadian critics, just because, it's not just about like, seeing like Asian representation on screen and behind screen, but it's also like who's writing about these stories? How do these stories actually exist beyond a festival space? Because it is a very temporal kind of what that happens like in a very specific time and place, but where does it exist afterward? Is it just the program notes? Is it just the social media post? So just thinking about also on our end, like the ways that we can actually support other outlets that also, nurture and like support, and thinking about criticism actually as like a form of care as well as like been really important on our end.
Thank you. Natalie.
I think that's a really good point, because say we get some stories on screen, but all the critics are white. It's still being seen and put out to the public through a white lens and through a white analysis. And there's a difference in how we respond to stories that come from our own communities and what's important to us and what really resonates. So I think, what Real Asian is doing with the young youth critics is a really good initiative. I was just going to mention that I feel like right now in part of the conversation around BIPOC creators is that we're all emerging, and we're not. And we need just as much attention on those who are stuck in the mid-level and haven't been allowed to rise up as the emerging, because it's not, when we always say emerging, it's like a 5 to 10 year process. And there are so many of us who are already in the industry and have the experience. We just don't have, or we have the life experience, we have the experience, we just don't have like the credits to be like senior or whatever. And that's, I feel like we need to make a big push in that direction.
Thank you.
Well,
Deanna.
Natalie, as you know,
that leads into my next question. Yeah. So well, Deanna, this leads right into my next question.
Okay.
So why don't I give you this? So 2020, what a year, right? But here we have two amazing new outlets. And so Deanna, if you could tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing at WarnerMedia and tell the audience where we can access information and what's coming up. And then afterwards, Joan, if you could say more add more to what you're doing at Black Screen Office, because it's just so exciting. I just want to know what you guys are doing and how to send people to you guys. Thanks.
Wow, thanks, Winnie. So much going on. So we are obviously we're still brand new, working with Melanie Hadley, who is she's amazing. She's just we just like let her go. Like, Melanie, go and do and dream. She is dreaming up the, we won't call it the impossible dream. She's dreaming up, like, she's dreaming big. She's thinking big. Oh, gosh, she's probably like, when she sees it, she's gonna be like, why did you say that about me? But anyways, you know, so I've been in this position for 6 weeks, and the whole push behind it, there's a series of initiatives behind these programs. Some are for above the line and some are for below the line. For above the line, we made a conscious decision to focus on mid-tier and experienced, because we've all been part of initiatives in the past which were geared towards emerging. There's a lot of programs out there for emerging. But what about the amazing talent? Exactly what Natalie and Joan were saying. There's an incredible talent who is called emerging, but have been working for a long time. And that's where, in conversations, we're going to focus our efforts for writers and directors. And that leads to our whole decision-making, the whole decision-making room, because when these amazing people who are at mid-tier and at the experience level gain opportunities, we know that they're going to provide opportunities for others from underrepresented groups. So right now, we're still in the design phase. We've partnered with the Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television to deliver, and it was announced on the 25th, the Writers Program. So we're still in design phase, and we are listening to what people want and what people have loved from previous kind of programs and what they didn't like. It's very responsive. We're very much want to be in tune with what people really need. So as I'm saying, we're at the design phase, and that there'll be a call for applications before the end of the year. We want to get it right. So I keep calling October is outreach month, although we just talked about that a couple of days ago, but we really want to make sure that we're connecting with as many people, getting that input. So it's right, because these programs are a start. These programs are for around 3 or 4 years, but this is the beginning of WarnerMedia's desire to connect with talent above the line in a real long-term, meaningful, sustainable way. As they have productions here, there's crews who are already working on WarnerMedia shows, and that's great for crews. I was a crew person back in the day too, working on all kinds of shows. But we want to have that same opportunity for writers and directors. So that's, I think that's pretty much it. I don't want to take up too much time, but in terms of access points, there'll be more information coming out in a few weeks' time, later on in the fall.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
So we are so new that we're just in the process of incorporating. So I can't tell you a lot, but just to say that one of our big focus is on the producers and creators and finding money. We really want to work towards getting private and public money that, where it's a lot of money that we can put into development and production and make that available so that we can compete internationally. And one of the things that particularly drives me, and for the lovers of statistics, I read just recently that in the 2020 UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report, they said that 41 to 50%, shows that have 41 to 50% of minorities in the film grows the highest in 2019. And films that had less than 11% minorities in the film performed the worst. And to me, that I'm shocked, but I'm thrilled because people are now they realize that it's good business and they're putting their money where their mouth is. Another thing that I think is important for us that we're going to really push on is who are the audiences in Canada? We've had these set-top boxes in these 5,000 homes for, you know, decades and through generations, and we don't really know who's watching TV. So we want to know who those audiences are. We know that, you know, approximately 23% of the Canadian population is BIPOC, but we also know that in the major cities, at least 50% of the populations are BIPOC. So where are those? Those numbers aren't being collected with these antiquated methods that these advertisers and broadcasters are using. So we want to change that narrative. We want to actually push the advertisers and the agencies that measure to change up their whole system, to look at who those which homes those boxes are going in, and start getting some accurate statistics to give us the power to say, we have an audience, you need to make programs for that audience that looks just like us, and drive your business in a way that is going to be good for you as business, but also good for us as consumers.
Fantastic.
And the audience is global, right?
Yeah.
The audience is global. Like we have to, and there's that slow shift, I think, to understanding that your content is going to go around the world, and people, you got to serve everybody, and the entire world doesn't not look like just one thing. And so I think that's what's exciting about this moment. I can think it's exciting about this time that we're looking at global audiences. We're looking at global appetites. We're looking at direct to consumer, where people want fresh voices, fresh perspectives. They want to go into the very specifics of a kind of different communities and experiences. There's so much opportunity there. And so it's a different time. So I feel optimistic. And you're right, Joan, those numbers, yeah, we need to get new fresh numbers, because there's fresh people watching and they're not being calculated, they're not being included.
Some of our funding agencies are also working on that old model too, saying we're going to give more money to these experienced white producers to make programs that they believe are going to sell internationally, and we're going to give much less money to other people who then have to kind of fight it out and figure out how to get distribution when distributors are saying that we can't market your program. But they don't know. Nobody knows that. The whole world is changing. And if we keep giving money to the same people to produce the same thing, then we're not going to reap the benefits, not only in our country, but as Deanna says, like internationally. Yeah. This is the opportunity for Canadian programming to actually travel, because we can shift that focus, we can shift the perspective and shift where the money's going to be spent. And I think we're going to all reap the benefits of that.
I think that's a really important point. Like the fact that the bulk of BIPOC filmmakers are funded in the MicroBudget grant is like, that's the most difficult space to produce film. It's like, it's harder to make a feature on a MicroBudget than if you had the 3 or 4 million that, you know, certain people have. And I know I looked at the past, I can't remember how many years of telephone funding above 4 million. And there was one Black man and there was one woman of color. And there was one more, and I can't remember, but that was it. And that's insulting. It really is. And if you if people want to have stories and showcase stories that center BIPOC voices and creatives, we need to get that money to make like the best possible product and not just be scraping by all the time.
Yeah, it's becoming unrealistic. You know, the imagery that they're giving us, you know, in this work, you know, it's becoming unrealistic, because in a town where you're telling us that's just, you know, the biggest town in your story or whatever, well, there's more than that one culture group in that town, realistically. So the stories are becoming unrealistic, and therefore, yeah, that's probably why those numbers existed in the Hollywood Report. Yeah.
Thank you. So I've had the pleasure of hearing Jesse Wente speak at Banff, and he challenged filmmakers who were asking about Indigenous consultants, and so about the right to tell stories. So right now we're talking about Indigenous narrative sovereignty. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how people can access resources at the ISO? Meg?
Hello, hi. Yes, it is a big issue and this is something that Jesse's talked about many times before, that there's a big issue with storytellers who become fascinated with the idea of an Indigenous story, and they come and they mine the resource of the story and leave nothing behind. They take the meat out of it and leave the shell of the broader picture of what it was behind it. It's not dissimilar to any other mining of resource that from land. Or it's important for us to tell our own stories, and as a means of representation on screen, largely because, okay, so we're a year and a half away out from the release of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report that came out last year. And one of the big calls to action was for representation in media, accurate representation in media, because negative representation, be it through journalism or through either a lack of people depicted in a good way on screen or in an accurate way on screen, actually is harmful to the way that women are treated in real life. And it trickles down. So there's a few ways that the ISO supports Indigenous narrative sovereignty. One of the ways is a protocols and pathways document that was created last year with the help of many Indigenous people who've been working in screen for a number of years, as well as within community. And it's a living document that continues to evolve over time. And we're actually revisiting it again as a way. It's not necessarily a map to tell people exactly how to work with Indigenous communities or with Indigenous stories, but it's a conversation starter and a way for people to respectfully work together. But in as much as the Indigenous Screen Office also provides funding opportunities for emerging and established Indigenous screen producers. So we have a partnership with Netflix, a training and mentorship and cultural mentorship program that we're hopefully relaunching again this year. But through Netflix, are able to give funding to people who are already. It's kind of like what we were talking about before, is folks who are mid-career and established, who just need the extra bump up in order to achieve the next level of their career. So it's focused at key people in key creative positions, and as well as cultural mentorship programs for people to implement their own protocols and language and use of language on set. But currently, right now, is the thing I should have led with, which is we have a deadline open right now that closes October 16th, which is Indigenous development funding. So it supports people from emerging to established on any part of the any part of the development phase of their project. We're also in partnership with Natalie and By POC TV and Film with a solidarity fund with the REMC, the Racial Equity Media Collective, providing funding for racialized screen creators specifically for Black creators, but it's open to BIPOC individuals as well. And that closes on October. It's a development funding as well, and that is open until October 16th as well. And I know we shouldn't be plugging things, but October 6th, it's actually going to be a Q&A in conversation about those development programs. That'll be live on ISO's Facebook page, but I think we're going to leave the video up just in case this comes out after that, but that should help with any questions around that funding. That won't have me highly caffeinated and stuttering through it. Hopefully it's helpful.
I don't know when this will be up, but hopefully soon. Natalie, you've been honored this year with the CSA Humanitarian Award, the WGC Alex Barris Award, and you're named one of Now Magazine's Trailblazers. Wow. Can you tell us a bit about Hire BIPOC and the recent increase in visibility of BIPOC TV and film?
Yeah. So Hire BIPOC is a new initiative that we're doing. We've been developing it in partnership with Bell Media, and it's a roster of Black, Indigenous, and people of color crew and creatives. And when I say crew and creatives, it means like executives, publicists, like basically anyone in the industry. And it's basically for all the people who say, we want to hire BIPOC, but we don't know where to find you. So it's officially launching on the 5th of October. And, you know, we're encouraging anyone at all experience levels who do identify as Black, Indigenous, or person
all of
color,
us.
to put your profiles up and spread the word. And then on the hiring side, like production managers and producers, there's a bit of a vetting process before they can access people's information and contact information. But we're really excited about it because it has industry-wide support. Broadcasters are on board. It's going to be tied to Greenlight for some of the broadcasters, which is pretty big. Yeah, so that's Hire BIPOC. And sorry, the other part of the question?
Your increased visibility. Oh my God, just trying to schedule a meeting with Natalie is like,
All right, I'm trying to schedule a meeting with myself. Yeah, it's been, I think what happened was that when you know, there were a series of murders that happened very close together, and we as an organization said that we need to create space for Black creatives to kind of come together and just acknowledge, like, we're trying to work under COVID, we're also trying to work and create, but there's this violence happening, and how do you create in that space, and how can we as non-Black people of color support? So we started a series, we started with like a solidarity Black Lives Matter Zoom call, and then that kind of went into what we call self-care Sundays. And that was really just to be able to hold space, and you know, anyone who was not Black was invited to shut off our cameras so that we would just be there and we could like type in our support. But the space was really for Black creatives to kind of express themselves and feel supported. We have another part of that iteration of that series is specifically for Black male creatives. And that's been moderated by RT. And then during this time, I guess people in the industry were feeling like how should I phrase? Sorry, just to go back. I think what happened was that in this time, people in the industry were feeling like they wanted to do something and didn't know what to do. And a lot of people started reaching out to us because we've been doing a lot of educational work, we've doing advocacy work. So people were, yeah, reaching out and asking us for advice, help. Some donations were coming in. Yeah, there's just been a lot of demands on the organization, and it is a volunteer-run organization. So yeah, it's been challenging.
yeah, challenging for sure, especially when you've done all the legwork and then you're asked to just do all the legwork for some other people. I think that's been a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think it's that balance of like, you know, people are finally listening, or people finally want to do something, so you don't want to be like, why won't you do me for, go away. So you want to be able to like help them be helpful, but at the same time, like everyone who's involved, or we all have our own creative careers that we're doing too. So it's a big juggling act.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got 2 film festivals here. Filmmakers tell their authentic stories, get their funding, scrape up the money, and make their films. Next step is visibility and audience. So Kelly and Tara, can you tell us about what you're looking for at Real Asian Film Festival and Emerging Lens Film Festival? And also, Kelly, can you talk a little bit about Unsung Voices, which is an amazing program? And Tara, this year you went virtual, but you have a pitch competition that is really amazing. Can you talk about that? So let's start with Kelly, please.
Yeah, what do we look for? I would say like coming from the shorts end, I think it's been really interesting because I've been talking to a lot of filmmakers, and especially like as we're going digital, like we really wanted to talk to each filmmaker to kind of extend some kind of connection to the festival and bring some familiarity. And it was really shocking that so many of them like felt that like they were really excited to receive like a festival selection to a lot of festivals, but they never really knew why their films were selected and how they would be programmed. So they were actually kind of shocked that I would actually want to talk to them, or our team would want to talk to them. So I think actually going back to something that Tara like said earlier in this conversation about like when thinking about telling our stories, and like, you know, definitely there's like, I think there's a certain kind of assumption that you have to tell your own story, like this idea of like what a Black story is or what an Asian story is. So I think for us, like definitely we, as much as those stories are valuable, like we are on the lookout for stories that like relate to what our communities need now, and to really think about how film is a way for us to begin conversation. And the way that we do program our shorts, they're in themes. So there's like a thematic, like I guess like tie-in for all of them. So I think on that too is like how can we also contextualize a filmmaker's story with these other films that they may not have like considered the ways that their film and their story can add to these conversations. So I don't really have like a direct answer in terms of what we're looking for, but I think for sure for us, like again, contextualizing work, framing work, and like really wanting it to be something that we can engage and activate and not just screen, like that's like very important for us. And in it again, I'm sure like everyone can understand it's not about screening always the best work, but like what are conversations that we need to have now. And I guess just like shift over to like Unsung Voices. Yeah, it's like a fantastic program. It's a free summer video production workshop where first-time filmmakers essentially go through this like really intensive boot camp where they develop under 10-minute short film, and then they have their world premiere at the festival. And what's like really exciting and fun about it is that as much as you're coming in to develop your story, you actually support the other filmmakers by doing like different roles. Like maybe for one film, you know, you're helping them with light, or another film, you're the DOP or something. So I think it's like a really cool collaborative program that's been we're in our 9th year now, but I guess on that, like this year it's been challenging just because we decided to go forth with it and it's digital and we can't offer the same kind of physical support. So definitely the filmmakers in the cohort this year had to have some kind of, I think, experience, and it was just like a different way of doing the program. But I think what's for me, like what's like really exciting is just, I think for these, I guess like first time filmmakers, just like, even if it's like a work that they may not necessarily be as happy with at the end, I think it's just like knowing that they can make something, and that they can actually, they already now know a crew that they can work with, and to also really consider that storytelling isn't just the story that we see on the screen, it's actually also the relationships behind the screen. What are these arrangements that happen on set? How do we treat people in terms of thinking about, even if it's low budget, how do we treat this economy of favors? What are these other conversations that are also just as important of thinking about how storytelling and the ways that we can avoid like harmful stories. So yeah, I'm just gonna stop there. There's like a lot to talk about, but.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, where do you begin? So what we look for is we typically program the festival director as well as a program coordinator, but we look for stories that, oh gosh, that, well, first of all, create an emotional roller coaster in person, but also that lend to our industry, like, oh gosh, how can I put it? For example, in our first 5 years, we specifically invite industry partners like folks from CBC, some producers and whatnot. And just because filmmakers are returning every year, we sometimes get the same filmmakers. They've been actually contracted to do work with CBC and this kind of thing. So we're completely a connector of community of the industry for filmmakers and for emerging artists and creatives. And so while looking for the types of stories that Kelly talked about, we do that, and we're worldwide. So of course it's harder for us to help in international creatives, but we have made those connections as well, because we have some connections with the BBC and whatnot. So yeah, so it's important for us not to just screen their work, but also to connect them to the industry wherever they're at in their, whether they're emerging mid-career or professional, as well as we always open up our evenings with performances, so spoken word performances. We've had painters that paint while someone's singing, you know, these kind of things, dancers. So we also want to connect musicians in the area, we've connected folks to write scores for other filmmakers' films. So it's a holistic experience for us. Oh gosh. And just moving into our pitch session, what we do is, again, I also mentioned earlier about creating work, because all of this comes down to creating the work. And so what we do is we'll have someone from IATSE, our local union, come in and do like a set etiquette. How do you work on, you know, on a set, and how do you carry yourself on a set? We have the local, William F. White here, that, you know, gives us an equipment grant. So basically they're creating like a 5-minute film, and ACTRA will let us do that under a training student grant so that the actors actually get a credit. So how do we get folks to get some credits? We actually shoot something. So, so on the Saturday when we take a break from screenings, we have folks, they can come from anywhere. They can fly in, they can walk in, they can do whatever, pitch your idea, and we literally take a health break, food break, and then we will shoot it in the afternoon. So you're creating real work.
Amazing.
So y'all got to continue that, you know, and it doesn't have to be like this whole big old thing, you know, just something simple that everyone enjoys and loves. And then we screen it. And then so previous to that, people would come in and pitch, and we'd have industry experts on the panel. And then whoever won, they got a whole production package, so they can actually shoot their thing within the whole year to present at Emergent the following year. So that's what we do. And it's important to mention as well that we, in what we look for, how we program. I mean, we are BIPOC focused, but we don't mind having white creatives. It's just that we have to let them know, don't send us something that's a dusting of culture. I don't want to see, you know, your main characters in love and they're doing something and they're walking somewhere, and then you walk by and you see an extra in the background who might be BIPOC, and then that's it. Sorry, not selected. So we've actually had returning filmmakers that have took that challenge. You know, they asked us, how come we weren't selected? And I'll let them know very, very you know, professionally and create, you know, give them criticism, positive criticism. And so, you know, I'll let them know, sweetheart, your idea was beautiful, but you just have to be really representative. Don't be dusting me in the background.
Oh
that's
my
it.
goodness. Okay.
I love a dusting of culture. I like that term. That's awesome.
We're nearing our end of our conversation. I can't believe how quickly time has gone by. So maybe I like to think of myself as a glass half full. I want to end this conversation perhaps talking about the advancements you've seen, successes, and what works. Because I've seen active change in the past few months, including changes in the boards, the look of the board, the composition of boards. People actually made those changes in the past 6 months. And so that's something that I feel is a positive change. Can you share with you what you've seen and why do you think that works?
I don't know if anyone else has noticed or saw, but what Ryan Reynolds is doing, the group effort initiative, I think that's brilliant. You know, in his little video, you know, he says he hopes that more celebrities will catch on to this. So that's real action, you know, and paying for it with his own pocket. That's cool, but you know, I'm sure he can get funding from somewhere for it. But I think that's positive change.
Thank you.
Where that can go on.
Joan.
I found what happened with gender parity was pretty phenomenal. The fact that within a year or so, that CBC was able to have 50% of their directors be women. What I wasn't happy about was that they're all white women, and that there was no intersectionality in that program. And you know, it harkens back, you know, white women in the 1920s when they got the vote. They told Black women to wait, and they had to wait 45 years before they got the vote. And I think that parity used properly can be a real tool of advancement now. If we look at populations, like even if we work with the number of 23% of Canada is BIPOC, well, let that be our parity measure, and let that really, you know, do a massive shift in what we see on the screen and behind the screens in the next year. Why not? If they could do it with gender parity, they can do it with BIPOC parity, for lack of a better term.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that's a great example of why setting targets is important and why it works. And where it didn't work was that the definition of women didn't always include, or there wasn't an eye on the fact that you also need to keep an eye on BIPOC women. One thing that BIPOC TV and Film is doing, we're involved with Women in Views report that's going to be coming out this fall, and the numbers show it. It's really depressing. The numbers, you know, it looks like women are advancing, but then when you look at the numbers of Indigenous women and you look at the numbers for women of color, it's not good. But I know that's not, you weren't asking for something depressing to end. You were asking for a glass half full.
Natalie drank the glass.
Well,
drink it all.
You know where we're starting from. when you look at the Women in View report, the numbers, you know, it's like all women is like this, and then Indigenous Black women of color are like here. Well, we only have up to go, so let's go up.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in, like, if you don't know where you're starting, like, you don't know where you're gonna go. So it is important that, like, the numbers are so important to make everyone see what's really happening. I think some of the positive changes that I'm seeing is that, you know, a lot of producers, or a lot more producers and showrunners and stuff are reaching out to us to get recommendations of writers of color, directors of color, they're trying to make an effort, which I think is really great. And one thing that we've been involved with Randy Lennox at Bell Media is he's been doing weekly listening calls, like every single week, where it's predominantly Black creatives who are in the meeting, and he's listening and trying to make change. And I think it's really inspiring to see, you know, there's some weeks where we have a difficult conversation and the next day he's picked up the phone and made some change, or has kind of influenced some sort of change at Bell Media. And it's kind of exciting to me to see how like systemic change can slowly start happening.
Thank you.
I'm gonna,
Deanna.
yeah, I want to jump on Natalie's point there, and I go back to champions, right? I mean, we are doing the work, but having high-level champions like that is, people look to that, right? That's where it starts. And I think what's exciting, I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm in this new position, but having global organizations come to Canada to address this specific point is a big deal, because it's a different lens. It's just a whole different sort of way of looking at things. And I think that, I mean, for me, I think that it's exciting that the department that I actually report to, which is Enterprise Inclusion Department, it's fairly new, but man, does it have a lot of muscle behind it. And there are people who are champions and talking the talk. And there are a lot of people who have been doing this work. And this is the opportunity to really make it happen. And it's in the midst of a massive shift from, legacy organizations are changing, within WarnerMedia. It's like you have different people running it now with a different focus, with a global focus, with a direct-to-consumer focus. And so definitely I think that the glass is half full. We're looking at things in a different way, in a bigger way. And I think it's definitely a great thing that we need to, that the door has been opened. We got to shove it, shove it open, shove it further open, so we can really take advantage or really build on this time that we're in right now.
Kelly?
Oh, yeah, I think also like on our end, what's been really interesting during this time is that a bunch of festivals, at least in Toronto, have been meeting quite regularly and like talking to each other and sharing resources. And I think that kind of transparency is like something that has been really fantastic to kind of see how other festival structures, what they're doing to think about their structures and like think about rebuilding them in a more equitable way. So I think having these ongoing conversations and really, again, like prioritizing like transparency as a way, and like not as like, like keeping our, I guess, our dirty laundry to ourselves, like actually wanting to address it and like really wanting to like look for ways to like work together and collaborate. I think that's been like very hopeful, I think, at least for myself. It's been that, yeah.
Glass half full. Meg.
Hi. I think, well, look at this panel. Like, look at all the work that everyone is doing on this panel. Like, again, to be so honored and humbled and intimidated to be a part of such an amazing panel, because you're not only is this a moment for change, but this is a beacon of hope to me that this is sustainable change. Like, this is going to continue to happen, and voices are going to continue to grow. Also, Trickster on CBC. Are you kidding me? That looks amazing. And directed by an Indigenous woman. It's an adaptation of an Indigenous woman's story, like fiction story. It's looks cool. I know some amazing Indigenous women writers who are in the writer's room. Like, come on. Given the Indigenous people, especially Indigenous women, being given a platform like this one to create something that's so groundbreaking, I think. I'm very excited, but like that's so groundbreaking. Means that hopefully can be a sustainable model moving forward as well.
Yay. Can't wait to watch it.
Well, Winnie, I just want to thank you for doing this and bringing us all together,
Yes.
because it in of itself is a really, really positive thing for us to see how like-minded we are and to be able to share our experiences, and
Thank you.
hopefully in the future to have more successes like Trickster that we can all jump up and down for. So.
Yeah, I
Thank you
think
very
this
much.
is just the start of the conversation. And I want to thank our wonderful panelists. You see how awesome they are. And I'm in awe. Like I learned a lot. I didn't, you know, like having these difficult conversations is just part of the, is part of where we're going to go, because we don't want to sugarcoat some of the struggles, but we also want to see that it's been changing positively. And I want to thank the St. John's International Women's Film Festival for inviting us to discuss why authentic representation matters.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you, everybody.